Welcome, quilters. We are getting together to have a little bit of piecing fun. We're going to be working on a project that is very freeing. You don't have to be so exact about your cutting. It's just to have some fun. The idea is to be peaceful in all of this, to enjoy the creativity and use up some of those fabric pieces that you may not have been able to part with at this point. My name is Colleen Tauke, and we're having a little fun with some foundation piecing today in the Mindful Mug Mat project. Remember to pop in under the video here and let us know where you're watching from. I have picked blues. I don't know exactly why I always focus on blues in January. Maybe it's because I'm praying for blue skies. We have blue skies outside in the Midwest in the United States right now, but the air temperature is really nasty outside. And when they start to cancel schools or delay schools because of wind chill, which are at the negative 25 point today, I might be just thinking blue skies trying to be warm, let the sunshine in. So let us know where you're watching from. Also, maybe the genre of fabrics that you might want to use. Let us know maybe that and inspire someone else. We have Catherine who says, hello from frigid Northwest Minnesota. Yes, our Midwest, hardy Midwesterner quilters. We have to hunker in this kind of weather. The thought of going outside when it's in the negative double digits for actual air temperature, we shake our heads at and say, I'm staying home and I'm going to piece for today. Kelly says hello from Arizona. Nancy is popping in from Southeast Kentucky. Maureen says hello from Oklahoma. Let's see. We have Susan saying hello from Ontario, Canada. Yay, there's our one of our Canadian quilters. We've got Pia saying hello from wintry Denmark. Our international quilters join us along. Laura says hello from Texas. Tracy says good morning from the Windy City. That would be Chicago, and it's cold there. Downtown Chicago is extremely windy. Karen says hello from freezing Fossmore, Illinois. I'm not sure where Fossmore, Illinois is. I'll have to look that one up. Cecilia says, good morning from Rochester, New York. So we're waking up our quilters. Everybody's just popping in. Donna says, good morning from Illinois. It's so much fun. Robin says, snowy Houston, Texas. Oh, and I saw that between Houston, Texas, I saw New Orleans had a winter storm warning or even a blizzard warning. That's unusual. They're getting a little taste of what we normally have. We don't have a flake on the ground right now. Deborah says, good morning from frigid Nebraska. Let's see. Donna says, funny. There's snow in Houston and none in Chicago. That is kind of upside down, isn't it? Dolly says, hello from Long Island, New York. That is wonderful. We are so glad you're joining us. Now, it's going to be time to raid your fabric stash. Oh, and if you haven't downloaded the pattern from the Mindful Mug Mat, the QR code I'm sure will pop up here quickly, and the link will be usually in the descriptions. My moderator's usually right on spot getting all those things ready for you. So if you haven't downloaded the pattern yet, you can always do that after the show. That way you can maybe just take some notes and thoughts about what you want to do. There is the QR code. So just put your camera over that. It'll grab that QR code, take you right to the pattern. Nothing in between to get you off track there. Let's see. Nancy from Michigan. It's a blue fan day today too. Okay, she's into the blues. Okay, Sandra says good morning, and friends from Chile, maybe snow later in north central Florida. Wow, that's one I bet you guys don't get too often. Nan says hello from Sydney, Ohio. I'd love to do a project using 30s fabrics. Oh, I have a little teaser at the end of the show that uses a 30s fabrics. You're going to love it. Christina says hello from Colorado Springs, actually just above zero. Okay, so you at least have a little more warmth in your air. Letha says hello from frigid Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Angela is popping in from Lake Helen, Florida. Valerie says hello from frigid New Jersey. I think it might be cold everywhere. So we need to warm up our sewing machines, plug in that iron, get it set to the highest setting, and let's get to having a little fun here. Now, this is done kind of log cabin style. I'm starting with a center. I did not coordinate my fabrics as I went out. I just had some fun with whatever I had going. I will show you later one that I did a little bit more planned, and I kind of like the scrappy version. So I kind of went that direction instead. Darylyn says, hello from Western Nebraska. I hate to leave anybody out. Let's see, Connie from North Carolina, Esther from the Netherlands. Jane says, hello, or it's Medicine Hat is warming up today. Oh, at least you get some warm. Well, we're going to be warm today. We might get to actually 10 degrees. Okay. So we're going to start with kind of a centerpiece here. And I chose a really creamy yellow because it's kind of a log cabin kind of construction historically. The log cabin block is made with a yellow center or a red center. And the story behind that is that yellow represents kind of the candle and the light in the window of the home. Red represents the heart of the home. Now, those are just ideas for what you might want to use in the center of yours. You may select any fabric. You could use one of your blues as your beginning, and you can work your way out if you decide. Yellow and red really don't appeal to me. But my yellow is very creamy, so it doesn't really scream at the center. I was afraid that if I put a red in the center, it would look like a target. And I didn't really want it to look that way. So I did more of a subtle creamy yellow in the center. And then I went, let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about picking our fabrics, just because you can use up a lot of scraps having fun with this. And literally, yes, I don't know why I have saved scraps. Now, some pieces have been cut out of these. I love to use ginghams or checks. I love dots. These are subtle blue on blue kind of prints that I went through, things that I had used for projects probably 15 years ago. And I loved them so much I couldn't get rid of them. So I saved. This was the perfect time to use. At some point, you do have to maybe part with the scraps. But I did a lot of blue on blue fabrics for mine, just because I knew I was going to be cutting them fairly small. And I wanted to kind of hold together as one color and read as one color. So I guess that was the parameter. It had to be a blue fabric. It had to be a very small print, or blue on blue, or something in that range, so it would read in the blues of lights, mediums, darks. Then I picked a fabric that I had a little bit more of as a backing fabric. And I kind of have a trick on how I'm doing the back of the project today, so you don't have to close a hole along the outer seam. Okay. And then I just picked a scrap of a whiter cream fabric, because I'm going to do this as foundation pieced, so that I'm building on top of that. So your mug mat has a little bit more body to it. It won't be floppy when we're done. Now, when you go to cutting off pieces off of that, and I do need to cut a couple of more lights here. The biggest thing when we're getting into this is in the cutting is making sure that you're going to have strips that you're going to be cutting. Now, I did not cut parallel strips. I cut random width angles, but I made sure that they were somewhere between 3/4 of an inch and 1.25 inches in width. And I have mine lined up over here, and I can probably show you what I mean by that. Is that, see, it's long, it's wide on one side, but narrow on the other. But I made sure that these are straight lines, that they don't have a stair step in them. I had one that was laying here that I thought was a good example. And now here we go. This is the raw edge here. That is not a straight line. It will not help me make a nice straight seam when I go to use it in my project. So I'm going to go back and cut that, trim it, so that I have not parallel cut lines, but straight lines on the two long sides of the pieces that I want to use. Now, I didn't cut them to length at this point. I just cut random lengths. And I believe I said that they needed to be at least 7 inches long. That will accommodate the longest piece. Now you can If you have multiple of each fabric, you could cut as you went and reuse pieces if you like, so that you could have more than one of a fabric. Now I have a nice straight line here, straight edge here, so that it's ready to go. And I laid out my fabrics kind of in the light to dark so that I could then just grab from that as I build my project. Okay, let's see. I probably have enough lights to get me started, I guess, there. So you also need to have, I guess I glued that in place already, a 6-inch square of that base fabric that we're going to stitch on so that you don't distort your seams. This kind of gives you the grounding area to do your piecing on. And I've already glue sticked my 4-sided cream color piece in the center there. It doesn't have to be exact, anywhere near center, just glue it right side up so that, and I use just a little bit of a glue stick. You can use that really inexpensive glue stick that kids use at school, or you can buy the glue sticks that's a little bit smaller in diameter glue so that you don't have such a big piece to work with at the local quilt shops also, or online. So that piece is centered there. I also have a piece of batting that will be my base that I'm also going to be stitching through. So I'm going to do quilt as you go to create this. You can always add more quilting later when we finish. So I'll show you that too. Eric says hello from Maryland. Kathy is popping in from icy Illinois. Sounds like it only snowed there once, and I know since my parents moved here in to north central Florida over 50 years ago, it's mind-boggling to think of snow in Florida. Yes, Sandra, you're just going to enjoy the flakes because I bet you they won't last very long. Okay, as for the cutting, you also will need to cut, and this is an option, a way to finish the back of your project with and I'm using a semi-solid fabric, kind of a marbled fabric, so that you won't really see the seam in it. I had in the directions, it calls for 3.5 by 6, 2 pieces like that as backing. And we'll walk our way through how to create that backing so that when you're done, there is actually kind of an invisible seam in the back here, but you won't have to worry about trying to close up one of the edges when you do that kind of pillow turn right side out, because I didn't want to use binding. It just slows me down. I wanted to be able to stitch around the outside edge, be done, and then turn. And we're going to do that through this little opening in the seam here so that you have a nice machine finished outer edge, because it's really hard to turn those seams, those intersections of seams on an outer edge. So this is a fun trick that I learned along the way, and I thought, it's time to share that with everyone. Joanna's from Brazil saying hello. We have Georgiana. I can't read with my bifocals. Georgiana from saying hello from Indo, California. Okay. Esther says hello from the Netherlands, and Dottie popping in from Florida. Robin says hello from North Carolina. Okay, let's have some fun and get started on our piecing, okay? Since we have I have an array over here, and I have my batting, my base fabric, and my little starter 4-sided piece. It doesn't have to be square. It can be, if you like, symmetry, but I just cut a 4-sided piece, a little bit random. Then we're going to build out from that. Now, here's my cheat. I'm going to show you. This is the other one I created. I like this one best. This was the more planned version I thought I was going to like, but it has kind of an interesting dimension to it, I guess. But I made all 4 sides, as I went around each time, the same fabric. Now, you can decide to do that if you like that look, or you can do the scrappy version like this. But you will see that I have built this through my base fabric, through my batting, and on the back, and I even pieced some batting together to use up scraps. So that's why there's a zigzag through the middle of that. I pieced my batting even, but it's stitched through all the layers, okay? So that it's quilted as you finish it. So here we go. Let's get started. We are going to start. Let's find a couple of fabrics that we can start with. I need to have a few that when I sit down, I don't have to get up right away. Let's see. We'll use maybe that one. And I kind of went light, dark as I was building. So I'm going to pick up some darker pieces and lay them near me. Let's go really dark. Let's go into one of these. It's fun to be able to use. That was a little bit wide maybe at this point. The wider the pieces you use, the quicker you will finish your project. Because as you build out those wider pieces, the idea is we're going to cover this entire base with fabric. So those wider pieces cover quicker and you don't use up as many small scraps. Okay, I've set my machine with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use the side on my foot as my 1/4 inch. Maybe you're using a 1/4 inch foot. The 1/4 inch foot with the blade on the edge doesn't work quite as well when you're working on top of a base. So maybe switch to a 1/4 inch that has a little cutout on it, or adjust the needle in your machine so that you can adjust it side to side so that from the needle to the outer edge or the right hand side of your presser foot is a 1/4 inch or fairly close to that. Now, since we aren't worrying about cutting exact, that 1/4 inch seam doesn't have to be perfect, people. This is the whole idea of just enjoying the craft, okay? First off, I'm going to take 2 pieces I've got my center on there. I'm going to decide to start on one of the short sides. I've got a piece of fabric, it's teeny tiny. I'm going to put right sides together and sometimes checking to figure out which side is the right side and these light fabrics. It's tough. But I'm going to align it on one side of that base piece. So I'm going to put it along the edge of the cream here. I'm going to put right sides together, laying it on top. And then because those cut edges are aligned, my 1/4 inch seam is going to go along that edge. Okay. Like I said, close counts. We're not doing heirloom piecing today. We are not being overly concerned about perfection in your 1/4 inch seam. This may be, if you were teaching a beginner, this might be a really good project for them just to learn how to maneuver the sewing machine. The presser foot up and down, cutting and trimming threads. It's a great way for them to get foot control over speed on the sewing machine. So we've got a whole bunch more popping in. Connie from Ohio, Deborah from South Carolina. Let's see. There's more than I can actually read there. Okay, we're going to stay with our piecing here. Okay, once you have that seam created, then you're going to take that little piece that you just added and press it outward toward the outer edge of your batting and your base so that you open up and cover the seam and you've got your first little log piece put in place. Now, it's going to be longer, more than likely, than the center piece. You can just trim that with a scissor. It does not have to be exact, but make sure that when you trim, it aligns with the next cut edge you're going to go to. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up and just trim a little bit of it off. Now, I'm trying to remember which direction I went when I was adding pieces. I went clockwise. So it doesn't matter which direction you go, just pick one way, write it down so you remember if you get distracted that you're going clockwise or counterclockwise. Like I said, it doesn't matter which direction you go, just be consistent because that will help the rounds go on very evenly. So now that I've added this piece, if I'm going clockwise, I'm going to go this way around like the hands on a clock. And as I say that, I'm thinking, young people today don't use analog clocks. The idea of clockwise might become obsolete because we use digital on everything. Okay, now the edges aren't perfectly aligned there, perfectly straight, but we're going to use the cream color fabric as our guide for the machine. So as I lay my next fabric on there, I'm going to align the straight edge of this piece with the straight edge of that very center so that I'm creating a straight line. And that little light blue one just pops out just a little bit beyond, but I'm going to use that, the center as my guide. And then using the fabric you're adding, use that straight edge for your 1/4 inch seam. Now you know why I'm saying you make sure that your pieces have straight edges along the long sides so that you can use those as your guide when you're stitching your pieces together. Going down through all the layers there, making sure that you stitch the entire length that you need. And you may need to put a pin in to remind you, I went a little bit long there. You can always put a little pin in to remind you, oh, you only need to stitch maybe 2 inches. I'm going to take out a couple stitches here so that, okay, I'm going to open this up, cover that seam that you just stitched. So here is the area that I stitched. There's my seam allowance over here. I'm going to open that fabric up, covering the seam allowance. And now I'm going to go back with a scissor and I'm going to trim along this bottom edge, kind of leaving a little bit extra, but I'm going to kind of keep that diagonal line in mind. I'll do the same along the top there because we don't need extra fabric inside the project. So close will count. Always trim long. You can always take more off. I always say it's kind of like a haircut. Once it's trimmed off, it does not go back on. So just go slow at it. So in general, I've got the same kind of angle there, but it's trimmed long and the top is trimmed long also, but just a little so that I know that when I go across with my next seam, I will catch all of that fabric as I build out. Okay, the next log, same thing, using that nice clean cut edge. I'm going to stitch my next one in place, remembering that I'm going clockwise. For me, it's easiest to go that direction because I think like a clock, I guess. But like I said, make a notation so you know which direction you're piecing your mindful mug. Okay. Now, when I was actually working on this, all of my strips kind of turned into kind of like spaghetti next to me. So don't feel bad if yours turns into a pile of spaghetti also. As you use up pieces, throw pieces back, saying, well, maybe this could go in the center of the next one because you're probably going to want to make an entire set so that you have maybe a set of 4. These are great to create as little gifts that you could put in a birthday card. You could take to a retreat. If you have a small group that's doing a little quilt retreat, you could give everyone in your small group a little mindful mug. There's my next piece on there. I opened that up to cover the seam, and I could trim a little more if I want there, but the idea is that we're building out around that center. Let's see if anybody has any questions as we're going along here. Eleanor is popping in from Ontario, Canada. Nancy says hello from Tucson. L. Watson, hello from South Sound, Washington. That might be an interesting place to visit. Okay, next piece up. Oh, I've used that fabric already. That's what's fun. You kind of just get to decide, okay, I want to use a piece of this and I want to use a piece of that. You can lay your piece on and do a little bit of a trim, leaving it long before you attach it. If you'd like, some people like to not have such long pieces while they're working, trim them out, just making sure they're a little long as you go so that you can build your piece. This goes really fast as you get to the outer edge because you start covering up that center. And pretty soon you're listening to a podcast or you're listening to the radio and you've all of a sudden realized you've built an entire mug mat. So, okay, trimming as you go a little bit so that it doesn't get too thick. This is also a really great place to use up bobbin thread. A lot of us will wind bobbins in various colors. Maybe we're doing machine quilting and we're doing a matching thread. And then you end up with half of a bobbin of some random color of of thread. And then you put it back into the holder or a bowl or wherever you store your bobbins, and then you never pull that one back out again. Well, maybe it's time to do a clean the bobbin project. And this is the perfect project for that, because the bobbin is going to be inside. No one's going to see it. I have bright red on this one just so you can see my stitching, but you could use up that odd purple, that funny green, maybe an orange or a hot pink thread, because in this stitching, no one's ever going to see what color of thread you were using. So it's a great place to use up those bobbins and clean them out so that you have open bobbins for the next time you need to wind a bobbin the right color. And yes, I'm actually admitting I do that. Sometimes people are like, oh, thread is cheap. I'll just unwind it and throw it away. But if you looked at the price of a spool of thread recently, nothing's cheap anymore. So that's why I tend to want to do these kind of fun little projects, because I call them my clean out the bobbin projects also. So drop in a bobbin of an interesting color, use it up, and then you'll be ready for that project where you need a lot of one color to complete your machine quilting. So is anyone, I'm going to put it out there, has anyone else done that before? It's one of those confession days, evidently. Let's see. Kay says hello from Mallorca. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sorry if I messed it up. Sheila says hello from Boaz, Alabama, I believe. Let's see. Thanks for teaching us so many neat things, including tips and tricks. That was one thing that I enjoyed when I've gone to retreats. I've done classes. I've gotten to know quilters over the years, that they share these fun things, and it's like, hey, I now have permission. I can do that. There's no quilt police that's going to come say, you didn't use the matching bobbin thread in your project. This isn't a garment project for 4-H state fair exhibit. This is to have fun. So no, there's no quilt police that's going to say, hey, you didn't use your matching thread. Okay. This is being practical, useful, and maybe just a little bit rogue once in a while. I like rules, but sometimes I also like to just enjoy the process and have a little fun. Okay, let's go with a little bit bigger, longer one. Remember, I'm going clockwise around. It's getting bigger so that it's going to start getting to the outer edge. And once you get to that outer edge, the clockwise thing kind of goes away. Once you've crossed an outer edge of your project, you're just adding bars to cover the base. And don't be afraid to go way beyond. The one that you saw, I had already trimmed that up. So it was very neat and tidy, but I'll tell you, it wasn't neat and tidy before that. It was a little like there's pieces flopping off the edge, and I just needed to cover that whole base fabric so that when I did trim it, I knew that I wasn't going to have a hole in my project. Okay, let's go another one. See, as we get out towards this, I'm going to use a little bit wider ones as I go out. And you can vary them. It's totally up to you how you decide what width to use in your project. See, some of them I'm trimming before. Sometimes I forget and just put that wide piece on there and let it go and trim afterwards. Just make sure you kind of pull back so that your batting layer, your base fabric doesn't get cut when you trim. You don't want that to get snipped into. If it happened to, it's not the end of the world, but you kind of want that base to be a good sounding sound place for your piecing to be at. So I'm going to put another one on here. Let me get one more on here or so, and then we'll talk about finishing this off and how to trim the outer edge and get that backing ready. Okay. And kind of remember, if you want to do scrappy, really make sure to try and force yourself, which sometimes can be hard, to use in a wider piece, lights and darks. Oh, that's the same fabric I just used. See, focus, focus, focus. Let's go to a darker piece here. And it is a little bit rogue to think about. You've got this pile of pieces you're just randomly, so that none of your mindful mug mats are going to match. All of us has different personality. It's okay that they don't match. The fabrics are similar. Heck, even if you wanted to make 4 completely different fabric colors, maybe you want to do one red, one blue, one purple. That's totally fine too. So it doesn't always have to match. But again, keep working your way around in order so that you keep, wherever you add a piece, go to the next side, add a piece, next side, add a piece. It's going to get to that outer edge. And once you do, then you're going to want to trim. I take all my little spaghetti out of the way. We're going to pretend this is covered. No one really wants to sit here for all that time to watch me just piece away. You're going to trim your outer edge, all the with your piece up to, let's see, I'm pretty sure that I trim to the edge of the base square, because that's the 6-inch square. That's what you need. So I didn't put a number in, but the base fabric, I said, refer to the base fabric so that you're trimming to that edge. I'm going to trim now so that I'm up to that base fabric. I'm taking away the extra batting. I always trim my batting or cut my batting just a little bit larger, just so that I know that if I just flop it on there, it's going to be good. So this is going to be nice and squared up. Also, great way to use up batting pieces. Okay, now, if my pieces had been off the edge, now I'm squaring them up, and I may have needed to flip over to get that, but 6-inch square or 6.5. I had you cut a 6-inch square, a base. So it's 6 inches. Now we're going to create the back of this project. So pretend this is totally covered. We're going to bring this guy in because he is covered. I did not trim it yet, the batting off of this one. This was kind of my work in progress, and that's why I opted to go to the more scrappy version. So we're at least have this covered, so it makes sense on how I attach the backing for you. You're going to be cutting 2 3.5-inch squares, or rectangles, 3.5 by 6-inch rectangles, like this. Now, if you would rather cut 1 6-inch square as the back and put binding around it, more power to you. Maybe you have leftover batting or a binding from a project already made. Go ahead and add that. I just didn't want to put binding on because it takes time. So I opted for this method instead. Okay. Patty likes the idea of using up a lot of the bobbin thread. Yay. Let's see. Catherine says, I use multi-bright or Insul-Bright. Would it make a good pot holder? Yes. Insul-Bright works. It's a metallic layer batting that reflects heat. I sometimes will still add 1 layer of cotton batting to that, just because I have to move a ways from my oven to a countertop where I can sit something down, and I like that extra layer of protection. So I'll use 1 layer of Insul-Bright and 1 layer of actual batting that's left over from a quilt. That's your option to decide how you would like to do that. So yes, you could just make this a little bit bigger, and it would make a great hot pad or trivet for your kitchen. Okay, I've cut the 2 rectangles. I'm going to put them right sides together. I'm going to seam along one side, 1/4-inch seam. Okay, let me double check myself to make sure that that's actually what I did. It's been a little while since I did it. 1/2-inch seam allowance. Okay, so you got to figure out where the 1/2-inch on your sewing machine is. So using your ruler, where your needle's placed at, figure out where the 1/2-inch, where a 1/2-inch will be on your machine. And I have notches on the base of my machine. You probably do also with the needle in the center position, use your ruler to double check to where a 1/2 inch seam allowance will actually fall. And I'm going to double check mine because I used my machine upstairs when I was piecing the original one. So 1/2 inch seam down through this. If I remember correctly, quarter inch seam allowance was quite narrow, having to deal with turning, and I didn't want distortion to happen. So that's why I opted for a little bit larger seam allowance. So I've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance through this. I'm going to take this to the iron. I'm going to press my seam open. And I don't remember who I learned this from. I remember picking this up from another quilter. It's, along the years, you kind of pick up techniques and ideas, and sometimes you don't always remember who taught it to you, but I do appreciate them teaching me this little trick. And I think it was on either a placemat or some other thing that they didn't want to put binding either, and they didn't want to have a turned edge near a seam, which is really hard to keep tucked in and make a nice outer edge. So now that I have my back constructed, there's a seam down the middle, works really good with semi-solid kinds of fabrics, either a mottled fabric or solid, so that you don't see the seam too much. If you have a print, this may not work quite as well. It just kind of hides the seam a little bit in a solid fabric or semi-solid fabric. And of course, when I need a seam ripper, they're all upstairs in my other studio. Okay, I'm going to use just the tip of scissors to snip a thread in that seam allowance. You could just do stitchaways, make a break in your seaming, but it's also very easy to snip one little thread or use a seam ripper to make just a little hole, so kind of like the size of a buttonhole or so we can flip this project around when we're done. So I have my turning hole. I can always adjust it if I need to later. Put this right side together with your pieced mug mat and then seam the outer edge. The other trick, in order to kind of get rounded edges, you may do square edges if you like, but turning thickness into a square corner sometimes can be an issue. I learned from another quilter a long time ago to, instead of when you're stitching to do a corner, instead of doing a perfect pivot, to do 2 stitches at an angle so that you allow a little space for all that thickness in the corner. So I don't know if this will show very well, but let me bring it to the camera. My pencil line here is to make a diagonal, like 2 stitches at that corner. So when you're stitching along, let's see if I don't think I have a light colored pencil down here. I have every color pencil under the sun. Let's see. Is this going to be, nope, not legible. Marking on dark fabrics has always been a quilter's kind of nightmare to decide. Okay, we'll just talk it through. When you're stitching your 1/4 inch seam, make diagonal 2 stitches across the corner, then continue. When you get close to your corner, make 2 stitches going diagonally to the next corner. By leaving those couple of stitches at each corner, it gives some room for all the layer and thickness of your project to have a place to nest when you turn this right side out. So as I'm stitching down one side, my light thread may show up enough for the camera here, or you can draw a curve along there if you prefer. I'm going to pivot, take a couple of stitches diagonally. Again, if it's not absolutely perfect, we're having fun today, correct? No one is going to be our quilt police. Okay, I'm getting close to my next corner. I'm going to do my 2 stitches diagonally. Then I'm going to go down the other side. If you like exactness, you may draw yourself a little template or curve so that you can trace that onto your fabric and make your corner nice and neat. But again, these are mug mats. They're going to get used My grandkids might turn them into frisbees before we're all said and done, which my own kids used to do sometimes. And that way you can cut, you can trim, you can stitch all the way around. There we go. Oh, on the back side, red thread. There we go. That's the outside edge. It's not really a pointy corner. It's not super rounded either. It's your choice on how you'd like to do that. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to trim the batting layer along this really close to my stitching all the way around so that it's not quite as bulky in the outer edge. So you may trim how you prefer. I'm also going to diagonally clip my corners. Again, that's kind of something that comes from garment sewing so that I reduce the bulk in those corners. Trim all 4 sides of the batting. If anyone else has tips on these that you would like to share for trimming or turning, please do so. Everyone has a little different tool that they like to use when they're turning corners or a technique. So this is a great place to share those little tips. Okay, one more side. And I might have taken a little bit more time when I wasn't on camera to trim this, but you trim it down close because we're going to stitch around the outside edge after it's turned. So keeping it close to that outer edge stitching. Try not to clip the actual seam you just created. That's kind of a no-no because we don't want it to fray out or have no integrity on that outer seam. Stitches that are close to that outer edge from your piecing, that trimmed. Okay, now that opening that we left on the back, this is just a pillow turn. So I'm going to go up to a corner. Sometimes it's easiest to get that corner to turn by just inserting your finger into the corner and get it started. And then it's just kind of birthing your project, I guess you would call it. Just slightly tug. Don't try to pull too hard all at once. It will slowly turn itself as you work the fabric. This is probably my least favorite part of the project, but I like this better than having to put binding and make 4 corners on a mug mat. So tug that just a little there. And the idea is then you have that seam up the back, which most people don't look at the back side of a mug mat. The seam in the back will be just kind of hidden there. It can rest in the back. This is a great way to do a wall hanging if you want to do a flip and turn. If you have a small wall hanging and you don't want to put binding in it, this would be a way to also finish that off without having to worry about fixing an opening along an outer edge. If you want that clean knife edge kind of feel to the outside of a very modern kind of wall hanging. So I've got it all the way turned right side out. I just need to get my corners kind of punched out with my finger. There are tools out there, the purple thing. There are some other tools out there that kind of a pointy edge to it that you can insert. If you use a skewer, you have to be kind of careful that you don't blow through the corner. You don't want to damage the seam that you created. But by slowly getting all of that turned, now we're going to take it to the ironing board, and press that outer seam. And you can feel how thick that is where I ran over those seams. And that's why I decided having to turn that or leave a hole along that outer edge when it would be very difficult to kind of camouflage that outer edge. And I thought this is a way to go to finish that back side. And then all I have to do is stitch across that little opening in the middle of my mat. And then, so now just hand stitch like you do when you're putting on binding or a label. You can close up that little opening on the back side there, and you could be finished at this point. Or I kind of liked the finished edge of stitching about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch away, all the way around the outer edge to kind of keep it nice and flat, and it gives it a little bit more stability along that seam. The other thing, and I already turned it. Think about it. When my piece is finished, when I've got all of my logs on all the way around and it's covered, I did add a little bit more quilting, if you want to call it that. As I put this up to the camera, look for the dark navy thread. I followed one edge of a fold all the way around in a circle. Okay, just to give it a little bit more quilting. But you know what? At this point, you really wouldn't have to. It's already foundation pieced into a base and batting. Nothing's going to shift out of place. It is technically quilted at that point. I just added a little bit more, like I needed one more step, okay, of a little bit of quilting for you to actually see there. This one I had done in squares with matching threads. So you can't even see any of the quilting on this one. So that's why I experimented with a darker thread. Again, adding those quilting layers, even stitching could be done even after you put your backing on, so that it would be a little quilted on the back. Just depends on your preference. Okay, so we have our mug mat, our little mindful mug mat, ready for tea, ready for maybe time to sit with a book and read and enjoy the quilting process. Now, if you've gotten the stitching bug and you want a project for a holiday coming up, Valentine's Day is right around the corner, and I've actually seen someone pop up. They had done their version of Radiant Ruby and done it. I did mine in pinks and reds, or kind of ruby colors. They had used Valentine fabric, so you can use Radiant Ruby to create yourself a Valentine table topper if you like. And we have links to those places also. And then My Woven Hearts was a project. Remember who was somebody wanted something with 30s in it. So this is my ode to, or my hats off to the 30s little floral print with that kind of 30s pink fabric, My Woven Hearts. And then I had done it in a larger size project also, because I loved those hearts so much. I went a little wild and did them in Valentine print and made a larger table topper using that fabric with just a few more hearts, and just being a little more aware of your placement of each of the blocks. So you can have fun creating a Valentine project. We do have something coming up before Valentine's Day, so come back and join us on our next episode. Thanks for joining me today.